At first, no one took her seriously. She spoke, and they laughed, not for the jokes, but because they thought their voice didn't matter. While the others moved forward, she was always the one who served the coffee, the one who decorated the room well, the one who knew how to listen. But no one noticed when she started listening less and planning more. Years later, the same people who laugh now fall silent every time she enters the room. This is not a story about revenge. It's about transformation. The kind that doesn't scream, but that no one can ignore. Invisible, but present Amanda always arrived before everyone else. She was the first to turn on the office lights, make the coffee, and adjust the conference room chairs with the same meticulous care every day. She performed these tasks without fuss, almost as if she were part of the furniture itself. Her steps were light, her presence discreet. Few noticed, but without her, nothing there worked properly. She worked as an administrative assistant at a mid-sized design agency. Her work was essential but almost invisible. She managed managers' schedules, ordered materials, organized files, scheduled meetings, and still had time to listen to her colleagues' concerns. Despite doing so much, she was constantly overlooked in company decisions. When something important was at hand, Amanda was rarely called upon. Her ideas rarely received attention. In meetings, she participated cautiously. When she dared to speak, she was frequently interrupted. Sometimes, colleagues simply exchanged glances and laughed. There was no direct offense, but a kind of silent mockery, rooted in the habit of underestimating. She's great at organization, but she lacks strategic vision, some said, as if her abilities were limited to answering calls and organizing files. And yet, Amanda was observant. Every gesture, every mean joke disguised as a joke, every dismissive glance, everything was noted, and everything was stored. She didn't defend herself. She just smiled politely. But something inside her was taking shape, like an ember that seems to be extinguished but burns silently. This constant silencing didn't extinguish her will. It only pushed her inward. Amanda began seeking new knowledge. At night, after work, she took online courses in project management, leadership, and business communication. She didn't tell anyone. She was preparing herself. But it was still early. The world around her remained the same. She was still the girl from the coffee shop. She was still called Amandina with a condescending tone. But inside she was a different person. And what no one saw was that she was growing up just in the dark. Small daily humiliations, if there's one kind of pain that slowly gnaws away, it's the kind disguised as a joke. Amanda knew this feeling well. Every day, amid seemingly innocent laughter, she was the butt of small jokes, always light-hearted, but always aimed at the same point. Her supposed lack of ambition, her secretary-like attitude, her nice way of handling everything. "You should smile more, Amanda," they'd say. Or, "You're great at organizing. But leave the serious stuff to those who understand." These comments were met with laughter, as if they were compliments. But Amanda sensed the venom behind the artificial sweetness. She wasn't considered a threat, and because of that, she was freely underestimated. Once, during an important meeting, she dared to suggest a new workflow that could increase team productivity. Before she could finish her sentence, she was interrupted by a colleague. "Nice try, Amanda, but that's management stuff, okay?" Some laughed. Others just looked away. She remained silent, swallowing her frustration. These small attacks added up. They weren't direct physical or verbal attacks, but rather small exclusions, stifled laughter, exchanged glances, and changes of subject whenever she tried to contribute. Little by little, Amanda began to distance herself from the group. She avoided group lunches, group coffees, and happy hours. She spent her breaks reading business articles, following online courses on her phone, and jotting down ideas in a notebook she never showed anyone. A blue notebook with a worn cover, where she scribbled process flows, management structures, and growth plans. Her colleagues didn't realize, or didn't want to realize, that Amanda was silently planting the future. With each disparaging comment, she responded with more learning. With each laugh, she returned with more focus. But what hurt Amanda most wasn't the exclusion. It was the fact that she believed in them. She believed, albeit silently, that perhaps she truly didn't have what it took to lead, to command. And this doubt was the cruelest of all, because it was internal, and it was constant, until one day, something changed. An unusual situation opened a crack, and for the first time, Amanda was able to show that there was much more inside her than others imagined. The spark of autonomy. It was a rainy day, and much of the team had opted to work from home. Amanda was in the office, as usual, with her wet umbrella leaning against the wall and her hair still dripping from her morning walk. Most of the managers and directors were absent, and the environment seemed quieter than ever. Then the phone in the meeting room rang. It was an important client. He was desperate. A proposal presentation for a new project needed to be urgently redone. The deadline was at the end of the day, and apparently no one on the creative team was available. Amanda answered with her usual politeness and promised to pass on the message. But when she hung up, she realized there was no one to pass on the message. She took a deep breath. For a few seconds, she stood at her desk, staring at her computer, and thinking about the dozens of times she'd heard, "You're just the assistant." But at that moment, there was no one else but her. And she knew the clients. She knew the agency's standards. She knew the project. He opened the files, studied the latest proposals, analyzed the briefings, and got to work. He created a clean, objective presentation with clear solutions and an impactful visual. He worked non-stop for hours, without consulting anyone, without asking permission. Late in the afternoon, he sent the material with a direct and cordial message. And he waited. The next day, the phone rang again. It was the same client. And this time, there was no tension in his voice. There was enthusiasm. "Who prepared this presentation?" he asked. Amanda hesitated for a second before answering. "It was me." On the other end of the line, silence. Then, a surprised laugh. "I want you to take care of my project from now on." She thanked him, keeping her tone neutral. But inside, something was rumbling. For the first time, someone saw her potential not as support, but as a solution. The news spread through the office. Curious looks arose. Some colleagues tried to downplay the situation. It was luck. She was just in the right place at the right time. But Amanda knew the truth. It wasn't luck. It was preparation. In the days that followed, she continued her work as usual. But something inside her had changed. That small spark of recognition had lit a fire within her. She was no longer the same. Now she had concrete proof that she could. And even though the world around her insisted on treating her as a supporting character, Amanda began to silently write the script for her turnaround. Planting in silence after the incident with the client, Amanda was never the same. But she also didn't go around boasting about her achievement. She knew that in that environment, any sign of ambition from her would be viewed with suspicion. So she carried on as always, smiling, meeting deadlines, being polite. But now, with sharper eyes and firmer intentions, she began making subtle changes to her own processes. She better organized team files, created shared folders that facilitated document access, mapped communication bottlenecks between departments, and fixed what she could herself. She didn't ask for permission. She just took action. And the results began to appear. Projects began to be delivered faster. Clients praised the organization. Managers themselves began to notice that certain delays had disappeared, without realizing that Amanda was the one doing the invisible work of patching up the operational flaws. She wrote everything down in her blue notebook. Every idea, every observation. She began making plans to restructure processes. She drafted proposals for improving productivity, suggestions for integrating departments, and new ways of presenting data to clients. But it wasn't time to show it off yet. Meanwhile, her colleagues continued to treat her with the same condescension. They made disguised jokes, interrupted meetings, and passed on tasks without context as if she was some kind of mechanical arm. She smiled and kept it to herself. At night, he studied. He enrolled in more advanced courses in project management and team leadership. He attended classes with notebooks open, highlighting topics that connected to the problems he saw in the company's day-to-day operations. One day, the manager asked for help with a report no one else could organize. Amanda delivered it in less than an hour. With a clean layout, well-distributed data, and a presentation ready to send to the client, the manager used it as his own. And he didn't even say thank you. She wasn't surprised. She'd expected it. And she didn't complain. Because Amanda didn't want applause at that moment, she wanted construction. She was learning to use silence as a shield. Not as submission, but as a strategy. It was as if she was slowly laying the foundation for something much larger. Alone. In the dark. Without witnesses. And what she was building wasn't just a professional plan. It was a new version of herself. Rejected by evolution itself after months of delivering consistent results, reorganizing processes, and earning indirect praise from clients and suppliers, Amanda felt she was ready for a new step. An internal position opened for an operations analyst, a position above her current one, with more responsibility and visibility. It was the kind of challenge she had been silently preparing for almost 2 years. With a carefully documented portfolio of accomplishments and a letter of intent written with honesty and clarity, Amanda applied. For the first time, she put into words everything she had been doing without recognition. She showcased the optimized processes, the results she had generated, and the ideas she had for the company's future. The interview went well. The manager seemed surprised by the depth of her analysis, but maintained a neutral expression. Amanda left the room with a slight weight on her chest, a mixture of hope and caution. Deep down, she knew she deserved the job. But she also knew the environment well. A few days later, the email arrived. Formal, dry, impersonal. We appreciate your application, but we've decided to move forward with another profile. Keep up the great work in your current role. No feedback. No invitation to talk. No recognition. Nothing. The pain was silent. There was no scandal. Amanda simply took a deep breath and read the email again. Then she closed her computer and looked around the room. It was the same as always. The same desks. The same colleagues who treated her like a perpetual assistant. The same blank stares that passed her by without noticing her. The next day, he learned who had been promoted. A newly hired young man, a college friend of the manager. He had little practical experience, but a lot of stage presence. He spoke loudly, gestured, and made jokes. He was the kind of person who knew how to get noticed. And he did. Amanda didn't cry. She didn't explode. But that night, when she got home, she remained silent for hours. Sitting on the edge of her bed, her blue notebook closed on her knees, she stared into the void and understood something profound. That place would never see the value she brought. No matter how much she studied, improved, or contributed in the eyes of that structure. She would always be the support girl. And there a decision was born. A decision that came not from anger, but from clarity. She needed to leave. She needed to rebuild her story far from a place that confined her to the shadows even when she shone. It was time to choose another path. One she would write herself. Silence and decision. After being rejected for the promotion, Amanda didn't change her demeanor at work. She remained polite, present, and engaged. To those on the outside, you might think nothing had happened. But inside, everything was different. Something in her had snapped. Not in the sense of weakness, but of liberation. The emotional bond that had bound her to that place, the hope of being recognized, there had been undone. Now, she was free to think big. In the following days, Amanda acted in silence. She updated her resume with the real results she had generated, even if they had never been attributed to her. She created a comprehensive portfolio, with examples of projects she had organized, reports she had structured, processes she had designed. She participated in selection processes in the wee hours of the morning, at home, with her computer on the kitchen table and her heart racing. He started getting responses. Bigger companies, more professional environments, places where the job description included exactly what she knew how to do and what's more, where the culture valued those who built things without shouting. Meanwhile, at the office the days continued as usual. The same colleagues, the same inane comments, the same bosses who delegated and then disappeared. And Amanda was there, focused, but already with one foot out. Her blue notebook now held a different kind of notes, transition plans, negotiation strategies, a list of interview questions. It was then that he received an offer. A growing startup focused on technology and agile processes. They were looking for someone who could organize the internal structure, create flow between departments, and oversee the team's growth. A technical, strategic role with room for autonomy. The final interview was with the company's CEO. Amanda calmly recounted everything she'd done, including the things she'd never been credited for. She spoke with authority and humility, but without belittling herself. At the end of the conversation, the CEO smiled. "Where were you all this time?" Amanda replied calmly, "Working in the dark. Now it's time to turn on the light." She was hired. And there, officially, began her new phase. New soil, new roots. Amanda's first day at her new company was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Right from the start, she sensed the environment, pulsating with creative energy and mutual respect. There was no oppressive hierarchy, no condescending jokes. There was collaboration, exchange, and listening. She was greeted with a coffee and a name tag that read, Process and Operations Manager. For the first time, her title reflected her value. In the early days, Amanda observed. She visited each department, spoke with all the employees, and noted processes, bottlenecks, and strengths. She didn't arrive changing everything. She arrived understanding. And this active listening already earned her respect. But what was most surprising was how her suggestions were received. When she proposed something, she wasn't interrupted. She wasn't questioned with mockery. She was listened to. And more than that, her ideas were implemented. And they worked. Little by little, the company changed with her. Processes became more fluid. Teams began communicating better. Previously chaotic reports were standardized. Clients began praising her agility and organization. Amanda, quietly, was making her mark. But more than external recognition, Amanda felt, internally, that something was blossoming. She was taking root in fertile soil. For the first time, she didn't need to hide or tiptoe. She could express herself without fear. She could say no without guilt. She could take the lead naturally. She began leading meetings, mentoring other employees, and being consulted on important decisions her former colleagues would never have imagined her like this, but now she no longer needed their validation. And amidst this new routine, Amanda did something symbolic. She bought a new notebook. Red cover, clean pages. The old one, the blue one, was kept with care. It carried the story of silence. But now, it was time to write a story of presence. When the past knocks on the door a few months after settling into her new company, Amanda received an unexpected invitation. A networking event bringing together professionals from various agencies, including her former company. It was a creative and operations industry conference, one she'd always wanted to attend, but had never been included. This time, she was invited as a speaker. It would be a roundtable discussion on organizational restructuring and efficient management of growing teams. When she read her name alongside other executives, Amanda smiled. Not out of vanity, but out of internal recognition of a journey no one else had seen in its entirety. On the day of the event, he entered the hall with firm steps and a serene gaze. He dressed with understated elegance. His demeanor wasn't one of someone trying to prove something. It was one of someone who knew who he was. She soon encountered some familiar faces. Old colleagues looked at her in astonishment. One of them approached, embarrassed. "Amanda, wow, I almost didn't recognize you. What are you doing here?" She smiled, held out her hand. "I came to share a little of my experience with process management." "What about you?" He tried to maintain a casual air, but his surprise was evident. Others greeted her shyly, now carefully measuring their words. They knew she was no longer the receptionist. Now she was a role model. During the round table, Amanda spoke calmly. She shared her journey, without exposing anyone, but making it clear that she had overcome silent barriers. She said that many talents are stifled by environments that fail to recognize the strength of quiet people. And that transformation begins when we stop asking for permission to grow. The audience applauded. One of the applause came from someone she knew well, the manager who had turned down her promotion. He was sitting in the last row. He lowered his eyes when she looked at him. As he left the event, he tried to get closer. "Amanda, I wanted to congratulate you. You've come a long way." She replied with gentle firmness. "I always had this potential. It just didn't fit in the space you gave me. No hard feelings, just truth." And there, in that brief encounter, Amanda received the confirmation she never expected. She no longer needed anyone's approval. Her presence, her words, her work spoke for themselves. Reaching the top months after the event, Amanda's career continued a quiet but steady upward trend. Her discreet leadership, based on listening and execution, attracted attention not only within the startup, but also in broader industry circles. Invitations for interviews, consulting gigs, and events began to pour in. But Amanda remained grounded, focused on her team and real results. The company was growing rapidly, and with growth came a greater challenge: international expansion. The board needed to appoint someone to lead the new office in another country, a complex, high-risk, and high-profile operation. Amanda's name naturally came up among the founders. She was called in for a meeting. She listened attentively to the proposal. Taking on the global leadership of operations would be a huge step, not just in status, but in impact. Amanda took a deep breath. She was ready. He accepted the challenge. Over the following months, she meticulously prepared everything. She formed a trusted team, organized training sessions, and redesigned logistics flows. On the day the new office opened, she was greeted with flowers and applause by a multicultural team that saw her as a role model, even without having met her personally before. Amanda gave a brief speech that day. She thanked everyone for their trust and emphasized the importance of listening, adapting, and respecting. She didn't mention past achievements, preferring to talk about the future. On the way back to the hotel, alone, she opened her new red notebook. In it, she wrote just one sentence. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to not give up on yourself. She closed the notebook with a slight smile. She felt complete, not because she had reached the top, but because she had built each step with integrity. There was no longer any doubt within her. Amanda was now the woman she had once dreamed of being, but never imagined possible. She had respect, she had a voice, she had a choice. And most of all, I had peace. When revenge is no longer necessary once upon a time, perhaps Amanda had longed for a reckoning. Perhaps she dreamed of rubbing her success in the faces of those who humiliated her. But now, leading an international team, respected for her competence and humanity, that desire simply disappeared. Revenge had lost its flavor. Not because the past didn't hurt, but because the present was so much more valuable. Amanda understood that what she had achieved wasn't just a position, it was herself. The woman she had become was her greatest victory. She saw her achievements as flowers that grew in soil where everyone said nothing would grow. But she watered them. She waited. She put down deep roots, and now she was reaping fruits that no one could take away. One afternoon, she received an email from her old company. It wasn't from one of her colleagues, but from the new director. They were undergoing a restructuring and were looking for an external consultant on process restructuring. And Amanda's name had emerged as the most suitable candidate in the market. She read the email, took a deep breath, and smiled. Not out of arrogance, but out of gratitude. Life had taken a turn. And now, the place that hadn't wanted her as a leader wanted to learn from her. But Amanda didn't respond immediately. She thought, evaluated, and decided not to accept. Not out of resentment, but out of respect for her own time. I no longer needed to go back to prove anything. I no longer needed to retrace my steps to validate myself. She didn't want to be the exception. She wanted to create environments where no one had to fight so hard to be seen. She continued with her projects. She mentored young professionals. She wrote articles. She was invited to speak on quiet leadership, the power of listening, and women who build behind the scenes until they conquer the stage. And he always said, firmly and gently, we don't need to shout to be heard. We just need to not let them drown out our voices. In the end, Amanda didn't overcome the others. She overcame the voices inside her that told her she couldn't do it. That she needed to fit in. That she was too small. She won not to be applauded, but to live with dignity. And when I looked back, I no longer felt pain. I felt pride. Because, deep down, Amanda's greatest victory was understanding that she no longer needed revenge. Because she had finally conquered her redemption.